Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Doctor is In. I'm Dr. Nadia Sabeh, and this is our special series, What Plants Crave, where we're talking to growers specifically about the plants they grow and how they found horticulture in the first place. I have the pleasure today of talking to Emily Churchill, Director of Growing and Food Safety at Vertical Harvest Farms in Jackson, Wyoming. I've been a fan of vertical harvest for a long time, since before even I started Dr. Greenhouse. I was super intrigued by the audacity that they had and their ability to grow leafy greens and vegetables in a stacked greenhouse. And they use this rotating carousel, all with hydroponics. If you haven't seen pictures or videos, you have to check it out. It is really a sight to see. You know, vertical harvest is also well known and respected inside and outside of our industry for employing traditionally underserved populations and really creating opportunities for those who are often overlooked and underestimated. You know, personally, I have a lot of respect and gratitude for vertical harvest's willingness and openness to share their experiences, show off their system, and share operational data to help all of us understand better how energy and other resources are being used, how they can be saved, and really help establish the benchmark and baselines that we need to make improvements. Truly, vertical harvest is a force to be reckoned with within our controlled environment ag industry. Okay, so Emily, welcome. It is so awesome to have you here on What Plants Crave. I'm really excited to learn more about you, the plants you grow, all the different plants you grow, and what your experience has been like growing vegetables in such a cool and unique system.
Thanks, Nadia. It's very exciting to be on the podcast with you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, thank you for your kind words about vertical harvest too. I feel exactly the same way, but I really appreciated it.
Yeah, lots of respect your way, and I think a lot of people are in awe of kind of, you know, walking the talk. You don't just talk about what you can do for communities, for local communities. You guys are actually doing it, and you're really a model for others who want to do that. So let's talk about you. What got you interested in horticulture and indoor farming?
Well, let's see. I think like a lot of people, it was kind of a coincidence and I was kind of in the right place at the right time, but I do have a science background. I really like fell in love with biology from a really early age. It was always like all throughout school. And I also always really loved food. Food was like a really big part of, it was just a big part of my childhood, a big part of one of my family values. And so I think, you know, farming has always been interesting to me as well. And then, specifically for horticulture and indoor farming, I, happened to move to Jackson, Wyoming the month that vertical harvest opened operationally. And I lived about 2 streets away, and pretty quickly met somebody who was working there and got involved in volunteering there basically in their like first month of operation. And it was just an incredible place to be. That, you know, everything about being inside the building was exciting. And yeah, so I volunteered for a couple months and then got hired on, and have kind of learned my way around horticulture and the industry just from being on the ground from the work experience at Vertical Harvest. So I've been there for like over 5 years now. And yeah, I just feel so lucky that I, happened to move to this small town in Wyoming and had the opportunity to get involved in this industry, because it's so interesting and exciting, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it.
What brought you to Jackson of all places? Are you a skier? Are you a park enthusiast?
I do like to ski, although I always laugh about this question because I actually am much more of a cross country skier than a downhill skier, and everyone in Jackson is obsessed with downhill skiing, but I love them both. But I moved out here. It was really on a whim. I had a friend from college who was living out here, and after college, I stayed in Boston for a year. I was teaching. I actually, yeah, I got pretty I was really interested in it. I actually still am very interested in education. And so after college, I was teaching middle school, and then that was just a 1 year contract. And, I was kind of like, after that job ended, I was not really ready to keep teaching. I just felt like I was really young. And I feel like to be a good teacher, you have to be 110% committed to it. And I just wasn't sure. I just was like, I don't even know who I am yet. I was only
Mm.
22. I was like, I can't teach these kids who to be yet. And so, yeah, that job ended and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. And I had a friend call me and she lived in Jackson and she was like, hey, I have a room opening up out here. If you want to move out here with me. And I was kind of like, oh, that's crazy. Like Wyoming, what even happens in Wyoming? And then I thought about it for a month and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. So I just packed up my car and drove out here. And I'd never been to Wyoming before, but I am a big outdoors person. I always have been. And so, I knew it was a really amazing place to live and have access to the outdoors. So I was excited about that, but I had no idea vertical harvest was going to be here.
That's amazing. Jackson called you to your calling.
It really did.
That's so
I
cool.
always tell people it really feels like fate.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, the right place, right time. I want to ask you, you made a comment that I thought was really interesting. You said growing up that food was a family value. What does that mean?
I think my dad is a really amazing cook, and his mom was a really amazing cook. And so I think there's just a lot of people in my family who love cooking and have been really into it. And, have a little bit of like dabbling in cooking school, although no one's actually like an official chef. But yeah, I think that food was always just a big, yeah, everyone really cared about food. We like talked about it a lot. It was always kind of like a big part of the day. Like, my dad will spend, 3 to 4 hours cooking dinner. Like he just loves it. He loves good ingredients. And yeah, we'd always all eat together. And yeah, so I just think it's something that, I think some people just eat food because they have to. Like they're like, oh yeah, I just got to do this because I get hungry and I got to like eat and then I move on with my day. But I think the way that like for my family, food is it's just good food is just really important. It's not something that's just like sustenance. It's something that definitely brings us together, but just also something that we care about, and it's something to be enjoyed and appreciated and valued.
Did you grow up in sort of a rural or agricultural area where you had a lot of access to fresh food and produce being grown? Or was it really more driven by, your dad and I don't know, sort of ancestry, enjoying cooking that then they sought out the food that they brought back in, or is it kind of goes together? And I'm sort of just asking this question because you just made that comment, some people just eat because they have to or because it's convenient. And when you think about European or Middle Eastern countries, you just everybody sits around the table. It is a big production. It is, a time when the family talks together, communes together, and is a centerpiece of so much culture, all the
Yeah.
cultures, right? You can make an argument that food is culture. And so I'm curious, like, yeah, how that all plays in your accessibility to good food.
Yeah, totally. I grew up for most of my childhood in New Jersey, kind of northern central New Jersey. And so in the winter time, there's not much there, but in this, it is they're definitely we grew up, in around farms, and we would always go to the farmers market. There were some amazing farmers markets really close to our house. So I think kind of like the excitement of the summer seasonal food was always a big deal. Like, everyone talks about Jersey corn and Jersey tomatoes, and those are like two of my favorite foods of all time. And yeah, and actually my dad always had a garden growing up too. So that's always super fun to be able to grow your own, your own tomatoes or your own whatever it is. So I think that, yeah, the seasonality, there was definitely access to local food. Yeah, in the spring and summer for sure. And I think also to your other point about, you know, different world cultures all really, yeah, food and meals being a big shared time. I mean, like I don't really know why, but when I'm home, like we usually don't eat dinner until 9 or 10 p.m., which is kind of a European thing. And yeah, like, we have a shared house with some of my dad's siblings and all my cousins, and my dad's sister lives in Italy, and so whenever they come, my dad and his sister, they both love to cook so much. And the whole like joint family, yeah, we'll all just sit at the kitchen table for like 4 hours. So there is kind of a little bit of a European vibe there. I don't really know honestly where that came from. My parents did live in the UK for a little bit. They lived in England for 8 years, but I don't think of England necessarily as being,
Food
the
culture.
quintessential, yeah, food culture, exactly. But I don't know if there is
Sorry,
some
our Brit
influence there.
listeners.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's like, I mean, I love England so much, but yeah, I wouldn't really call it
With
yeah.
the last name of Churchill, you have to love
Right.
England.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's a good segue in talking about New Jersey. I mean, the excitement of spring and summer vegetables. And I do think of tomatoes when I think of New Jersey, but mostly because my PhD advisor did his research and started his professorship at Rutgers doing greenhouse tomato research. So it all comes together. I mean, what does he think about growing plants year round and having access to fresh produce all the time and not just seasonally? Does he think that's really cool what you're doing?
Yeah, he does. He has, since I've gotten involved in vertical harvest, I think he's started trying out more, techniques, different kind of growing techniques, and starting the plants indoors and then bringing them out later,
Nice.
and all of that kind of thing. So I think, yeah, he thinks it's really interesting.
Cool. Well, great segue in talking about the sort of seasonality that we're forced with by growing outdoors and now coming indoors. So tell us about what you specifically do at Vertical Harvest, and then let's talk about why would you grow? I mean, it feels obvious, but why would you grow these vegetables in a greenhouse in Jackson, Wyoming?
Yeah, I mean, as you just alluded to earlier, the short growing season, yeah, is a great reason to be growing indoors in Jackson. We're at a pretty high latitude, and then on top of that, at a pretty high altitude as well, or above 6,000 feet. And so the growing season is really short here. I mean, you can't, we still have snow outside, and it's mid-May, so you can't really plant until June, and then it's definitely gonna start snowing again in October. So you really just have from June to September.
What
And
can you
even
grow outside?
I know, exactly. I mean, it's tough, let me tell you. I've been trying the past couple of years, and even during the summer, it can still get below freezing kind of at any time. Like, I remember a few
Wow.
years ago on the summer solstice on June 21st, it snowed.
Oh
And
my God.
so growing outdoors here is definitely challenging. I do think Jackson is kind of right. Jackson is right at the base of the Teton Mountain Range, and right on the other side of the Tetons, on the Idaho side, there's a little bit better of a microclimate there for growing. It's a little bit more, I'm not totally sure why. It's some effect of the mountains, but there's a lot of farms on the Idaho side of the Tetons and not very many on the Jackson side. It's a little bit more of a mild climate, I think. And so There are some amazing local farms in the area, but it's still, regardless of that, it's still a short growing season. So that's one reason it's great to grow here. We're also a pretty isolated town. And so Jackson has to truck in and fly in pretty, a lot of food, and it has to travel a pretty long distance. And so that's another great reason to be growing food locally. And yeah, I think, the way that vertical harvest started, there was just kind of this small plot of land in the town. It's like, 100 feet by 30 feet. And the town was kind of like, what should we do with this land? And the town council, I think, kind of put out a request for public comment, or requests from the town, like, what do you think we should do with this? And that's kind of how the idea came to be for vertical harvest. But I think it's kind of it's a small plot. It's kind of it's like right up next to a parking garage, as you know from being there. And so it would be kind of a strange, or it's just kind of like a long, narrow, skinny plot. It wouldn't be that suited for a lot of different types of buildings. So I think putting a stacked vertical greenhouse there was a really creative and amazing thing to do with kind of this strange strip of land.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, 100 feet by 30 feet, there's so many greenhouses, just normal greenhouses, that have those dimensions, right? I mean, just a regular old greenhouse could have fit right there and done really simple. But to go vertically and basically create 3 greenhouses on top of each other, and some space to have an office and, a storefront and all that kind of stuff that you guys have, is really unique and creative use of that space. Because you went vertically, I think a lot of people sort of scratch their heads and say, well, why a greenhouse? Why didn't you guys just build like a real vertical farm on that plot of land? Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah, I think originally, I don't know this for sure, but I think originally one of the proposals to the town was to just put like a hoop house there, kind of what you're saying. But we had, yeah, I mean, I think part of it was Nona Yahya, who's our CEO. She was originally the architect for the project. That's how she got involved. And I think and then it was her and Penny McBride, and another co-founder who kind of had a sustainability and farming background. And I think between the two of them, there was, this idea came up of like, why stop at one story? And I also think Nona's background as an architect, she talks a lot about creating architecture that really enhances the community that it's in. And I think there's something really beautiful and really special about having that building be a greenhouse, all of the glass facade, being able to see in and see the plants growing. Literally every day people in Jackson walk by the greenhouse. People just like stop dead to stare at it and just be like, what is going on here? And it really is so beautiful. And it was designed to be a community resource and a community hub. And I think having it be a greenhouse with that glass really helps draw people in, and really, just adds to the Jackson community.
It is a really cool building. I mean, the first time I visited, I was going to be coming the next morning, and I arrived that night and was at staying at the hotel across the street from it. And just like the pink glow, and just it's such a unique structure, and it does really stand out as something architectural and beautiful. And it's hard to miss if you're in that corner of I mean, how do you miss it? Yeah. And you guys actually invite visitors in.
Yeah. I will. That has diminished since COVID, unfortunately.
Sure.
But yeah, originally we had, like you said, we had a little market in there so people could come in, they could buy the produce, and we also just had like, other little gift kind of items for sale as well, other like local artisans And then we also do public tours, a couple days a week. And yeah, they're a big, the project is a public-private partnership with the town of Jackson. And so it is really important to us to be a community resource. Since COVID, it's been tricky to allow visitors in, but we're just starting to get back to doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I want to talk about with you, but just on that point about, having visitors come through pre and hopefully post COVID and opening your doors. I mean, that also makes you really unique to our industry. One, you have the stacked greenhouse model that I don't know if I've seen really anywhere else in application other than beautiful diagrams and depictions of what it could be. But also sort of your open door policy and letting people in on the secret, right? And on, what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. Why is it were you forced to because of this public-private partnership, or is it just part of the value system that Vertical Harvest has to share with the community in general? Like, where does that spirit come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a value of the company. We always talk about one of our core values is transparency, and we're always like, we literally have transparent buildings. And so I definitely think it's a cultural thing. And I think the public-private partnership has been so valuable for us and is going to be so valuable for us going forward to other communities as well. For a lot of different reasons, but we really believe that Vertical Harvest is going to be civic infrastructure in future urban locations. And so I think that I think it's important that people, when we build farms in new communities, that people feel connected, they feel like they know where their food is coming from, they feel like they can share if they work there, those jobs they can share that experience with the local community. So I think it's really part of the values of the company. It doesn't I think it's really part of the values of the company.
Yeah. So let's step back to a little bit of the technical talk. So you're growing in a greenhouse in an environment where it can snow in June. And you can dip below freezing in the summer. So again, why a greenhouse exactly? Like, are there benefits in your climate, in your specific location, of growing in a greenhouse versus, say, a fully enclosed vertical farm or farm that has opaque walls? Do you get benefit from your climate as well?
So I have a lot of thoughts about this. So first of all, I feel like our farm in Jackson is kind of a combination of greenhouse growing and indoor growing. And depending on which part of the building you are in, it's either more like a greenhouse or more like an indoor, fully indoor farm. And so that is actually quite challenging, but also has, we've learned a lot from it. But, as an example, the tomatoes, which are grown on the third floor, they have a glass ceiling and a glass facade. And so the tomatoes are growing in, it's, very, very much like a greenhouse, a true greenhouse environment. Whereas the lettuce, which is on those rotating carousels, is kind of in the middle. So the lettuce spends some of its time, like about, a quarter to a third of its time along the window, so it's getting that greenhouse effect of the sunlight through the glass, but then it spends a good chunk of its life cycle kind of like inside the building as well. These carousels are in an L shape, so they go up the glass facade and then kind of back into the building and then back down again. And so lettuce is really a combination of it's getting sunlight and we have artificial lights in there as well. We have LEDs. And then we also grow microgreens and what we call petite greens, kind of like baby salad greens. And those we grow on rack systems, stacked rack systems, And they are kind of essentially full indoor growing. They don't really they don't get any natural sunlight. And yeah, and I think the the building as a whole is actually quite subject to the outside weather, which is a challenge. It can be helpful, but I also think it's kind of a challenge, keeps us on our toes. But yeah, so I think in general, the building is kind of this hybrid between indoor growing and greenhouse. And then it has, even within that, has this gradient depending on what crop we're talking about.
I mean, I think it's really clever in just thinking about what crops you're growing where and using the natural resources that are available. When I think of tomatoes, they like a lot of light, they like it hot, and they need to be tall. So,
Exactly.
whoever's genius idea was to grow them on top, bravo. I feel like that was the right thing to do. And then lettuce,
Exactly.
right? They don't need as much light, so they don't need all that exposure to the sun. And so you rotate them away and bring them back, and they're still going to hit their DLI, with that amount of exposure that they get. And then, of course, you have the LEDs and the microgreens. Are the microgreens fully in supplemental lighting, or do they get any exposure to sunlight?
Very minimal. And it also, again, we have a couple different rack systems within the building.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of have the original ones, and then we kind of, as time went on, a couple years in, we kind of built our own like newer rack systems. And then most recently, as you helped us with this project, we put in our kind of third iteration of racks. And that particular iteration is a fully enclosed area. And that has been a really interesting, just an interesting part of the farm and the learning that we've done over the past 5, 6 years as operators. I think that we call it compartment 5. That's the building is split up into 7 compartments. So compartment 5 is the one where we kind of built this, we call it like a box within the box. And that is fully controlled. There's no outside sunlight. And that has been really helpful for us as we think about how we want to design and build our future farms. And I think the future locations are going to be much more of, true CEA, like true controlled environment, less of the greenhouse stuff. I think there's still discussion about having the glass facade, as I talked about, more as an asset to the community and the architecture, and more from that angle. But this new compartment 5, our new growing area, is really kind of what we're using for R&D for our future farms at the moment, trying to figure out how do things grow best.
I mean, you're growing a lot of different plants. You have experience growing a lot of different plants for commercial production. What do they have in common? What makes them different and unique? Do you like growing one more than the other? Do you have a favorite child?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, they're really different. Obviously tomatoes as vining crops are really different than greens. They are, we kind of talk about tomatoes. You just have the plants around for so much longer. You have them for 6 to 8 months, and so they need a little bit more love and a little bit more attention. And you kind of have to, you're always trying to strike this balance of, are they in a vegetative state or in a reproductive state, and having them be stressed, but not too stressed. And you kind of, you got to take pretty good care of them to keep them around and producing well for that long of a period of time. Whereas, for leafy greens, you can push them pretty hard. You're kind of like, they're only going to be around for whatever, 6 to 8 weeks. And so you can really try and push them to grow as fast as possible. And so, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting difference. And I think I don't know. I think I started in the microgreen department, so I have always had a little bit of a soft spot for them. But I really like growing all of the different kinds, and I think testing out new varieties is always really interesting. And yeah, I don't know. I like them all for different reasons, I think.
Okay. Okay. Good answer. Good answer. Good plant mom.
Yeah,
Answer.
yeah, exactly. It's also, the microgreens are, it's really fun to bring people through the farm, and people don't know that much about microgreens still. And so, when you give people samples of different microgreens we're growing, they're just kind of blown away by the amount of flavor that they have,
I
and
know.
how many, we've at any given time we're growing usually like around 30 varieties. So we've got a lot of different varieties going there. And so people get so excited about that, but then people also get so excited about the rotating carousels, as you were talking about earlier, the lettuce systems, like that. That's a really cool thing to see. It's really cool to just see this like sea of lettuce moving towards you slowly. And then people are always blown away by the tomatoes too. Just, walking in there and feeling like you're kind of in this jungle.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think they're all really special to see.
For that carousel system, how exactly do you irrigate those plants? I mean, you have a stationary plant and it's like, okay, so you have deep water culture, you have like water streaming across them in NFT, or maybe you have drip irrigation for tomatoes. But if you have a plant that's always on the move, how exactly do you irrigate that plant? Do you take it to the
Yeah.
water as opposed to bringing the water to it?
Yeah, kind of. So the way that they're designed is that, yeah, they're constantly rotating, but I can set, on our Priva system, I want them to irrigate every 10 minutes or whatever it is. And they will stop in position. So along the along the left side of the carousel, there are emitters, maybe every 8 inches or something. And the trays will kind of, when it's time to irrigate, the trays will stop, they kind of like lock in place. They stop right under the emitter. And then as soon as the irrigation cycle is done, it starts rotating again.
Do you think there's an advantage to moving plants around continuously? Like, could it discourage pests or could it give it different wavelengths of light? Or, I mean,
Totally, totally. I mean, I think that definitely are advantages. I will say that I don't know if the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. I'm not sure we will be replicating these systems anytime soon. We're definitely not planning on having carousels in our next facility, which is going to be in Westbrook, Maine. I don't know if we'll ever go back to them someday, but the carousel, they do have a lot of challenges. But I do think the ideas behind them, the idea behind them was, I think there was some good ideas. And then I also think that there probably are some advantages, like you were saying, for pest management with having them constantly moving. I think it's hard, that's just harder for pests to get situated and get comfortable if they're always
yeah,
moving. I think it like kind of inherently gives you some airflow, which is always good for the plants.
yeah.
And and then the reason that they were designed the way they are is that they can take advantage of the natural sunlight along the facade, and then also get the supplemental art like LEDs light in the building. And I think that's very clever. And another awesome thing about the carousels is the harvest kind of comes to you. So they're actually
Ah,
like ergonomically, and from an employee standpoint, they're pretty accessible because those trays are constantly just moving towards you. And you just, when our employees harvest, it's like they harvest a tray, then you hit the button, the next tray comes into that slot. So I think from an accessibility standpoint, it was a pretty good idea. Or or for like for scouting, or
oh, yeah. The
anytime you
plants
need to
just came to
interact with them,
you.
yeah, they just come to you. And so I think that it was a clever idea. But the flip side of that is that the maintenance for these systems is really not accessible. It's like the opposite of accessible. So like there are some tasks that are great, but then the maintenance really, you have to climb out there on these systems. It's really hard to get out there and fix any irrigation problems. And they're also, yeah, they're just pretty complicated mechanical structures with, lots of sprockets and chains, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of weight on them all at any given time. And
And they're
so,
getting wet.
and they're getting wet. Yeah, that I actually wrote that down too. The dripping has been a huge issue for us,
Mm.
honestly. So, I think they were a really cool idea, and I think it was really interesting to pioneer, but I'm not sure, I'm not sure they're the best for consistent production. And it's also, it's challenging too for, as a grower, the plants are kind of rotating through a bunch of different environments throughout the building. And it's just, it's really hard for me to know exactly what's going on at any given time. It's really hard to control variables with these carousels. It took us years to kind of figure out how much DLI they were actually getting. And that came through this partnership with the University of Wyoming. Dr. Karen Panter, she came up and we actually kind of put these light meters on an actual carousel tray, and it was so it would
You
rotate
did.
through. Yeah,
Yeah.
because between the sunlight and the LEDs, but then also it's a little hard to describe without a visual, but while the plants are coming towards you, maybe they're like 3 to 4 feet away from the LEDs, but when they rotate back away from you, then now they're like 6 feet away
Oh
from the
my
LEDs. So you
gosh.
kind of have these two tiers. And then, yeah, so anyways, it was really hard to understand how much light they were actually getting. I know for a fact that they're going through different temperature zones, and the carousels take
Yeah.
about 20 minutes to rotate. So throughout that 20-minute time period, they're going through different temperature zones, different amounts of humidity. And so I think as a grower, they've honestly been pretty challenging to kind of figure out how to optimize the best growth because there's just so many variables at all times.
That is so super interesting. Just all the microclimates that
Mm-hmm.
those plants are seeing in a 20-minute cycle, 24 hours a day.
Exactly.
So yeah, if you have a problem, which variable is it?
Exactly.
Is it the light? Is it like a short exposure to a cold facade?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And I do think as I said earlier, there's 7 different compartments in the building, and they're not sealed off from each other either. And part of that is because these carousels move between a
Oh
couple different
yeah.
compartments. And so, that makes it hard from a control standpoint, in terms of like, really controlling temperature or humidity or whatever it is. But also, just thinking back to pests, like it's kind of easy for them to move throughout the building and not really know how they're moving throughout the building because these plants are moving through different zones all the time.
Yeah, you
Um,
don't really have sealed compartments where if you have a problem, you can isolate it right there. But
exactly,
everything else is safe as long as you've like
exactly,
quarantined that area.
exactly. Yeah, we've seen, and like in the tomato room on the third floor, we have bees in there for pollination. And with every hive we get, there's like 1 or 2 bees that get lost and they somehow find their way onto the first and second floor, and they can't really find their way back. So there's yeah, it's challenging to not have the compartment sealed off.
Wow. I with the research partnership you did with the University of Wyoming to look at the DLI, when you did that study, did you make changes to the supplemental lighting? Did you discover that maybe they weren't getting enough light or they were getting plenty of light? Did that inform you about anything?
Yeah, it did. We discovered that they were not getting enough light. And so we switched out the lighting that we had with those carousels. But I also think that's kind of just a function of the industry evolving and just, just general time. Like the building when it first opened in 2016, all of the lights above the lettuce carousels were HPS lights. And those only have a certain shelf life to begin with. And, between 2016 and now, there's been such incredible development in LEDs. And so, I think we would have moved to LEDs regardless, but that study really helped us understand what light intensity we needed those LEDs to be at. So that did help us understand kind of where the DLI was currently and where we needed it to get to.
As a grower, as a director of growing, what are the variables? I mean, we've talked a lot about lighting here, but what are the other variables that you're monitoring and managing? I mean, you're also dealing with these different compartments and different plants. How do you keep it all straight? I mean, what are you looking for when you walk in every morning? What data are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is this is a little bit of a boring answer, but I think, definitely the standard metrics that growers are looking at, coming in every morning and checking the graphs on the Priva. That the 24-hour cycle is really important to look at every day. So, always looking at temperature and relative humidity, and I think those two are huge. We're also, being hydroponic, constantly looking at water readings, EC and pH, and all of those kind of things. I mean, I think those are really the big ones. And yeah, those are really the big ones. And
what are you looking for? I mean, are you looking for blips and spikes? How do you sort of, if you see something that looks out of range, what do you do? Like, what action do you take?
well, I think in addition to kind of looking at that data on a daily basis, it's really important to be looking at the crops every day as well, be actually, doing a walkthrough of each of the different areas of the building. And I think you have to kind of take that quantitative data and the qualitative data and combine those to make informed decisions. I mean, the sensors that we have, they're only in one or two or whatever it is. They're only in certain spots in the room. And so, I think it's important to go into each of those compartments and really kind of like feel how the environment feels. Does it feel cold? Does it feel warm? Does it feel too humid? And are there weird pockets, like, or what's going on? So I think I kind of like to come in, look at the data, look at the graphs, then go upstairs, check out what's going on. Is there anything weird going on? Maybe, also it's just so critical to have a team that is, constantly making sure that the systems are all working correctly in the building too. There can be just like, weird one-off things where I can't think of a good example, but like if a misting nozzle is clogged or something like that, you can just have these small things that actually, over a 24-hour period or longer than that can have a big impact on the environment. And so, it's really critical to do walkthroughs for that reason too, to make sure that all the equipment's functioning as you want it to. And yeah, so I think between, looking at the previous 24-hour period and then going up there and looking at the crops and, it's just seeing how the roots look and seeing how the leaves look, like what color are the leaves, how does the new growth look, all of those things. And then, looking at after, doing all of those observations, going back and deciding if you need to make any, changes for the next 24 hours. And also I always look at the weather forecast as well. I don't think that's kind of more because our Jackson location is kind of more of that hybrid of like greenhouse slash indoor. But, for example, on a cool, cloudy day, which we've been having a lot recently, I can pull the misting back. It doesn't, because the humidity will will hold better. The vents won't be as open because it's cooler
Oh.
outside. And so, on a cooler day, I don't need as much misting, but on a really sunny day, I definitely do because of that greenhouse effect. And so,
So you're
or
doing
if I
predictive control
a
yourself.
little bit, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't always work, but yeah, I'm trying to. And kind of this past week, we had a couple nights where it got down to like 19 degrees, and so you might want to, that's not totally the typical pattern for May, and so I'll bump the heat up a little bit if I know it's going to be cold that
Huh.
night, that kind of thing. So yeah, the outside weather definitely affects us more than I think most people would guess, and definitely more than I expected when I first started.
In Jackson, is it easier to control your environment in the winter or summer? And by summer, I mean like true summer, not like June 21st, it's still snowing outside.
um I don't know if well, for us, it's definitely easier to control the environment in the winter time.
Okay.
But I think that is a function of we do not have enough cooling capacity in this farm, which I don't think we just didn't know at the time and the way
Yeah.
it was designed. But we have a really hard time um, keeping it cool enough in there for the lettuce in the summertime.
Oh, sure.
The tomatoes have
They
no
love it.
problem with
They
it. Yeah,
thrive,
they're
I'm
they're
sure.
thriving.
Yeah.
And now that we have this fully sealed rack system, as I mentioned, that's like our newer thing that we put in 2021. That has no problem in summertime either. But the lettuce, the lettuce struggles in the
Hmm.
summertime. We just can't really keep it cool enough.
How long did it take you to get a feel for these rooms? To know like, oh, this is off, or oh, this is perfect. Because again, you have so many different plants you're growing in so many different environments, and you didn't necessarily come from horticulture. Like, was it a
Totally.
month? Was it a year?
Honestly, I would say it was a couple years. It took a long time. Like I said, when I first started, I was just doing microgreens, which, because they're really short grow times, only like, between 1 and 3 weeks. They're a little bit more straightforward in terms of climate. But yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get used to all the different aspects of the building. We had I think the second year, I think in year two, we brought in a consultant from this company called Vortis Greenhouse Consultants, and his name was Martin, and he would come, about once a month, and then it would kind of slowly tapered off. But he would come and visit the facility, and he kind of taught me everything I know about Priva and just a lot of general growing knowledge as well. But I think his insights and his knowledge that he transferred to me and to a couple of the other growers have been really critical in really understanding kind of the relationship between the facility and the plants, and how all of the systems work together. And so I think it took us a long time to get those things dialed, and it's always kind of an ongoing process.
Sure.
We've also, I think, over the years, we've put in a couple different new growing systems into there too. Like, as I mentioned, we kind of have three different iterations of rack systems in the building, and so we put in those new type of growing areas, and we've kind of rearranged the building a little bit in some ways. Like, we kind of had packaging in one area to begin with, and then moved it to a different area actually for food safety reasons. And I think we're kind of always playing around and experimenting in the building. So I think there's always a lot to learn, but I think it definitely honestly, it took the first couple of years to really understand how the building worked as this like one big ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, especially when you have them open to each other, those compartments. It is one big
Exactly.
ecosystem.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you, you guys are collaborating with the Resource Innovation Institute, sharing some of your data, production data, energy, water, waste. I mean, it's really impressive, helping to sort of benchmark this industry, and we don't have a lot of participation as of yet from all of the various sectors of controlled environment agriculture. But I just wanted to get a feel for why you guys agreed to doing this, and what you've learned and what you're hoping to learn and what you're hoping the industry at large can learn from this sort of partnership.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think you mentioned this earlier as well. I think Vertical Harvest has always been pretty open about what we're doing and how we're doing it and all of the data that we have. And I think that's not always true in the industry. And so I think, we were excited about this collaboration. And I think Hannah Boulin, who is our Director of Impact and Sustainability, has really been leading this charge. But partnering with this project kind of helped us in two ways. First of all, just helping us understand costs, but also understanding, the sustainability impact of all of these different factors. And yeah, I mean, I think we just want to be part of being really transparent about the data that comes out of these farms and how we can all work as an industry to improve that. I think, specifically that going through this process with our RII has helped us shape how we think about KPIs and our general environmental management system, how we want to measure things. But I also think, we're really excited to see, as more people participate in this, what the comparative data is and how that helps us set targets. And yeah, I mean, I think the more data that we can share, the better technology we can develop, and the more that we can learn about how to make CEA in general more efficient.
Yeah. Why do you think there is hesitancy from the industry to collaborate on projects like this or share their data?
Well, I don't really know, but
That's
I
fair.
think it's pretty competitive right now. I think the industry is still new and young, and because of that, I don't know. I think there's a lot of excitement, and I think there's just a lot of people just want to figure out how to be the best really fast. And so I think that's a little bit part of it. And I also think, something that we talk about a lot at Vertical Harvest is really wanting to understand our operational data and our energy usage and water usage and all of those things, because I think CEA in general it's really portrayed and touted as being really sustainable in how much less water it uses and how much less land it uses and all of those things, which I do think are true. But I think there's kind of these general metrics or these general kind of like facts that everyone uses for CEA. It's like, between like 70 to 90% less water usage. And I think that, not that those things aren't true, but I just think, we just really need to dig into the data a little bit more and really see what's going on there. And at Vertical Harvest, we just are excited to really dig into that and see really what our numbers are, because we just want to be, as straightforward about it as we can. And once we have that baseline, those benchmarks, we can start improving from there. But I do think, honestly, there's a little bit of kind of this greenwashing effect in the industry where we know that it is sustainable and it has a lot of benefits and it really can help with resource efficiency. But I think that, the question, I just think we really need to dig into the data to see like where we're at and where we can go. And I think just kind of, just saying like, oh, we use water efficiently and leaving it at that, isn't really enough.
Yeah. I think what you just described is really powerful. I mean, I hear a few things. One is knowledge is power. by knowing where you're starting from will only help you make better decisions about how to improve upon what you've already started with your foundation, to not only maybe improve your production indices, right, those KPIs, but also to reduce your impact on the environment and increase efficiency and sustainability and water use efficiency. And by actually measuring it, you know where you're starting from and where to go from there. The other thing that I heard in that implicitly is a fear. There's a fear in this industry that if we pull back the curtain and reveal that we really don't use water efficiently, we really are wasting energy, we really are dumping shit down the drain, excuse my language, right? That maybe we're not positively impacting our communities and environment like we're all declaring through press releases and interviews and publications and all these different things. And the last thing we want to do is put a spotlight on on the deficiencies of our industry. We want to stay focused on the positives of our industry. And fear is really powerful. Fear is a more powerful driving factor than knowledge and increasing our knowledge and educating ourselves. And even thinking about my PhD research, where I was really focused on evaluating water use efficiency of growing tomatoes in a greenhouse. And I poked a hole in that idea that growing any plant, but let's just say tomatoes hydroponically in a greenhouse is more water efficient than growing a tomato out in the field. And here I am in Tucson, Arizona. I came from California. I mean, water is like the headline in every conversation.
Yep.
And, I'm reading this literature. I'm like, okay, whatever my project's going to be, it has to be about water. And so I'm like reading the literature and all I see is hydroponics, irrigation, hydroponics, fertigation, blah, blah, blah. And here I am in Arizona, and we are relying 100% on evaporative cooling to manage a really hot and dry climate to grow these tomatoes. And I was like, nobody has looked at how much water we're using to cool this greenhouse. It's all about irrigation. Like, there is a missing number from this equation. And so that's what I focused in on. And sorry, everybody. But
yeah, that's really interesting.
When you add evaporative cooling to the water balance of a hydroponically grown tomato crop in a greenhouse, it looks a lot like field production in California. I mean, there are so many other benefits, right? I mean, TOVs, right? I mean, it's fresher, better quality, year round, local, blah, 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 blah. All the things that we know are positive about controlled environment agriculture. But to make this claim just straight out the gate that it's a more efficient use of water is not always true. And we need more people to pull back this veil so that then we can say, how can we then improve? How can we stand by this claim? What do we need to do to make this a reality? Because just that my finding was not the end of the story. That should be the beginning of the next chapter.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think CEA has the potential to do really amazing things for sustainability and resource management. But I just, like you said, I just think it's really important to be very honest about where we're at now and what our baseline is and where we want to go and how do we get there, and so that the proper resources get put into figuring out the answers to those questions too, like the research and all of that. And I would also say too, I don't think that that's not just a criticism or not just an issue in our industry. I think in general, I think kind of across
right.
all industries, I think people lots of people want to be sustainable, and they want to be able to have that as a company value, and they want to be able to say that they're making strides towards that. And I think it's not just a CEA thing. I think everybody needs to just be really, really clear about what their baselines are in terms of the impact that they're having, and how they're, going to put a thorough plan into place for improving all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, we need to get real with ourselves around a lot of issues in this world, but climate and sustainability being really important. I mean, we were talking before, we started about the weird climate we're having in May, and it's been like the Midwest here. It's been in the 60s. In the middle of May, we've had afternoon thunderstorms. I mean, next in my mind is tornadoes. I mean, this is, and then it's going to be 100 degrees this weekend. Like, I'm scared. And the more real that we can be with ourselves and with each other, the faster we can tackle these challenges that are practically behind us now, not because we've solved them, but because we've just ignored them. And it's frustrating. And just the last thing that I want to say is, being afraid to share data and talk about what we're doing, and being afraid that people are going to realize maybe we're not as sustainable or efficient or positive as we like to say we are. The other side is we also need to be afraid of the regulators coming in and saying, you have to do this in terms of energy and water and decarbonization. And without us telling them where it is we're starting with, because maybe we're doing a better job than we even think we are. And wouldn't that be amazing if we actually started sharing this and we're like, hey guys, we're actually doing better than we thought. What were we afraid of in the first place? And then we could get the regulators off our back a little bit and be like, no, we're already doing a great job. But even without even doing that, like, the regulators are also afraid, right? All they see is this burgeoning industry that is using all this light and potentially using all this power and resources and blah, blah, blah. But without actual numbers to base any decisions off of, whether you're a grower trying to decide how you're going to manage your climate or your irrigation water, or you're a regulator or a utility trying to manage, right, how your users, how your constituency are using resources, we're all blind.
Totally. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see as this industry continues growing and continues, the public gets, starts to understand it better, and the government and the regulators and all, everyone kind of just has more awareness of it. It'll just be interesting to see how everything evolves together. And I also think too, to your point, like, about, maybe we're doing better than we thought we were. That was one of the interesting things that came out of the RII report that they sent to us about vertical harvest, was that we actually were doing better in a lot of things that I didn't really know what to expect, I guess. But there were a lot of really positive things in that report. And I would say the general gist of it, or at least what I took away from it, was, over the past 4 years, they looked at our last 4 years of data. We've essentially figured out how to grow more plants within the same building, within the same footprint. And so we've, overall increased our efficiency. And, that was really exciting to see. And it's kind of obvious now that I think about it, because I know that we've been growing more plants in there, but that was like a positive outcome of that report.
That's awesome. I love that. I love hearing that. It's not always negative feedback. There's positive feedback, and I'm sure you take a lot of pride in the fact that what you've learned in these last 5 or 6 years, those couple of years it took for you to get a feel for the environment, and you've become a better grower for it, and your KPIs have followed suit.
Totally. So, yeah. Totally. And, lots of credit to the rest of the team as well. I mean, I think we've all put more we just put more growing systems in that building. We built more growing, infrastructure in there, and that just helps us, be more efficient too.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's jump off of the sustainability train for a second. So the other part of your title is food safety, director of food safety. Talk a little bit about that. A question we get a lot from growers and from people within the industry is, how they can create and maintain a healthy environment for their crops, reduce incidences of mold growth or certain bacteria maybe in the water. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that and any tips that you might have for new or existing growers of any crop?
Definitely. I think a big part of food safety is having great documentation. And so you really want to make sure that, yeah, you've got, good SOPs and good logs and great checklists. And those are the things that really help you kind of stay on track on a day to day, week to week basis. But I think in addition to that, honestly, training your staff is hugely important. I think people need to understand that food safety is something that you value as a team, and they need to understand that it's something that they need to be looking out for on a day-to-day basis as well. And you just kind of need that awareness and that buy-in from the team for the documentation as well. Like your staff are going to be the people that are filling out a lot of that paperwork a lot of the time, and they're going to be the people that notice things and catch things. And so I think it's really important that as a manager in that space, you're training people so that they have the knowledge, and training them so that they have, like a positive association with food safety in the way that, it's kind of like if somebody notices a problem, like you said, whether they see a little bit of mold, or, if something falls on the floor, there's no hesitancy or fear of reporting that because it's a bad thing, but it's like people are encouraged to report things that they see as potential hazards. I think that's important. I think, I've experienced this at Vertical Harvest. Because we're GAP certified, and we do that audit with the USDA, and being audited is like not necessarily the most fun thing. It's kind of stressful. You have this person coming in there, they're really closely observing you. They're combing through all of your paperwork, and I always feel a little bit nervous that day, and I know that the team does too. And so it's easy because it feels like a test, or because it's an audit, to have that feel like not a very fun experience. But I think it's important to always, to talk about food safety regularly, and to talk about it in a way of like, this is how we become better operators and better food growers, and this is how we become a better company. And we always, like, yes, we have to be audited every year, but we always want to be going above and beyond that because this is something that we care about. And so I think, yeah, I think having that positive mindset about it is important. And the last thing I would say, which I kind of already said this earlier in the podcast too, but I think having a really solid kind of like facilities / maintenance team, or whatever you might want to call it at your specific farm. But I think having equipment operate correctly is just kind of the foundation for everything. I would say it's really important for food safety. It's really important for growing. It's just important for consistency overall. And I think that's kind of a lesson we've learned in Jackson. We have so many different types of systems in there, so many different pieces of equipment, so many different maintenance requirements, that staying on top of all of that is a lot. And I just think it's kind of the foundation for everything.
That was an excellent response. Documentation and SOPs, training and buy-in, and properly operating equipment. I mean, 1, 2, 3, done. I also really liked what you said about if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
Kind of in a nutshell, and not be afraid to say that you see a spot of mold or that something is not right. That the sooner you can identify that and point that out and bring that to somebody's attention, the more likely you're going to be able to contain it and eliminate it before it affects the rest of your crop. And just encouraging your staff not to sort of like be afraid that the fingers are going to be pointed at them, that they did something wrong because they
Exactly.
pointed it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really powerful message right there. I like that. So, okay, kind of wrapping up here, and we've talked about this a little bit already, but do you consider controlled environment agriculture and specifically around food production, do you think, are we a more collaborative or competitive industry?
Well, I don't know. I think it feels a little competitive right now. Like I said earlier, just kind of being at the very beginning of this really new, exciting industry. I think there's just so much excitement and so much drive to like get to the front of the industry. But I will say, going to events like the Indoor Ag Conference that we went to in March, that environment does feel very collaborative. I mean, I think there's so many different people working on advancing all different parts of the industry, whether it's, seeds or grow medium or water treatment systems, or, I mean, there's literally 1,000 things to list. And I do think that people do really want to collaborate and do trials together. And I think in order for us to increase and further our knowledge and research, all of those different pieces do have to work together. And I think it seems everyone I've met has been really excited about that. So yeah, kind of on an individual level, or company to company, I think it generally does feel pretty collaborative. And I think we all kind of want to work towards the same things too. Like everyone wants to work towards food security and more sustainable practices and more local food and all of those things. So, it does feel like everyone's kind of united in these problems that we want to tackle, which is great and inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a little bit of hesitancy for people to like share, exactly what they're doing or share their exact data, or their like secret sauce or those kind of things. But yeah, I don't know. So I think there's kind of a balance, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, so that's kind of where we are now. How do you predict our industry is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? What's going to happen to vertical harvest in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, hopefully, our plan is to build a lot more farms in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's what's going to be happening with vertical harvest. We're looking at lots of different locations across the US. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the industry in general, I think the technology is moving so fast. That's going to be really fascinating to see. I think, kind of specifically from my growing perspective, I think people are going to be researching and learning how to grow a wider variety of crops more efficiently and kind of better in indoor farms, whether it's hydroponic or not. But I think right now the really standard stuff is vining crops like tomatoes and peppers and and lettuce is really standard. But I think people are going to learn how to grow, are going to get better at growing a lot more types of things, which I'm really excited about. I think something we talk about at Vertical Harvest a lot is I'm hoping, I think there probably will be kind of this focus on nutritionally dense crops. I think that kind of plays into this whole goal of food security and and climate change. So I think that there'll be a lot of interest and movement in that direction. And yeah, just I think I'm excited to see the industry get bigger and have there be more public awareness and public knowledge, and as we were talking about earlier, hopefully more knowledge from the government and regulation side as well, and having people kind of acknowledge and really be able to see firsthand that this industry does have the potential to solve a lot of issues that we're facing in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just on that last note, that is one thing about Vertical Harvest, that bringing it back to the beginning of our conversation, by having that facade, by being in a city center, on the edge of a city center, anybody walking by can see what you're doing and can be curious. And, even for vertical farms who are working in local, in cities and urban environments, and feeding or serving their local communities, I think there's value there in terms of that public awareness of what we're doing. That, you kind of throw this term loosely around of a factory farm, right? And in Japan, they call them plant factories. And factory maybe has a negative connotation for people, but showing them, like, just having a view to the inside of just a small area, just to say, look, we're growing your food here locally, hyper locally. You're going to eat this lettuce plant at dinner tonight at your at whatever restaurant you choose. There's also, I mean, only seems like it has positive benefits.
Exactly, definitely. And I think I mean, I agree with you. I do think the word factory has a little bit of a negative connotation, but I also, I hope that we're starting to, that we'll be able to kind of change that perception, because we do need to be able to produce a lot of food to feed all of the people that we have on this planet. And there's nothing wrong with producing a lot of food. So I do hope that people become more aware of that.
Good call. So, last question. What do plants crave?
I think my answer is going to be plants crave healthy relationships. I think that I think they crave healthy relationships with the environment that they're in, and with the people that they're around all the time, and also with each other, with all of the other plants that they're around all the time as well.
That's awesome. I love that answer. That's a great answer.
Thanks.
So, all right. I end all my podcasts with a few rapid fire questions. So just quick answer, 1 or 2 sentences. If you want to expand on anything, please feel free to. All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. Number 1, are plants introverts or extroverts?
I think they're introverts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, I think mostly because they're so quiet.
Oh, okay. They
Which
keep to
is
themselves a little?
Yeah, they keep to themselves a little. They're quiet. I think that's always something I love about working in a farm, in a greenhouse, is, being there with all of the plants, and the plants themselves aren't making any noise, but you can really feel their energy. But yeah, I think I think introvert.
Okay. When you go home at night, they pull out a good book and they just say,
Exactly. Exactly.
Can CEA create a more equitable food system?
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you want to say why?
Well, I think specifically the way that Vertical Harvest is doing it, I think we are bringing high quality food to local communities and bringing jobs as well. And I think that yeah, I think that the access to good food and good jobs is a big part of helping a community become more equitable.
Awesome. What's the best advice you've ever gotten about growing plants?
Just spend a lot of time with your plants.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. They seem to like that too.
Yeah.
What's the worst advice you've ever gotten?
Um, I can't think of anyone who has specifically given me this advice, but I think an easy trap to fall into is kind of limiting yourself to like this is what the parameter has to be. This is what this is the number you have to hit at all times in order for your plants to be perfect. And I think
Hmm.
get kind of like forcing yourself to fit into these rigid parameters all the time isn't always going to work. Like you're working with living things, and there's always going to be a lot of variables going on, and probably even more than you actually know about. And so I think being flexible and kind of being curious and being really observant is important. And so I think you can't just stick to this is how I've done it, this is what's going to work every time. I think you got to be a little bit more open-minded than that.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, people say, I want it to be 80 degrees and 60% relative humidity all the time,
Right.
and with no deviations. Like it has to be perfect. And one of my initial thoughts is, well, maybe your plant wants a little stress, right? I
Right.
mean, what doesn't kill you
Totally.
makes you stronger.
Right. Exactly.
And if you're a tomato plant, you probably need some stress to go into reproduction. So,
Right. And I'm sure that there's just so much about plants that we still don't understand, especially specifically growing them indoors in
yeah.
our industry. But I think there's so much we
Yeah, we
still
grew
have
them
to learn.
outdoors for 10,000 years. Now we're trying to figure out how to
Exactly.
do it inside, and we've been doing it for a few decades.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, last question. Of the crops that you currently grow at Vertical Harvest, which do you think bison would prefer?
Whoa, that's so interesting.
I had to pay a little homage to where you are,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Let's see. Well, I think that they would probably like the microgreens the best. I think those would be easy for them to munch on, and they are really nutritionally dense. And I think bison are really smart, and I think that
Mm,
they would probably be looking for a really efficient food source. Um, I also have a little bit of a cop out answer to this too.
okay.
We are currently doing a pilot program with the Teton County Conservation District, and we are testing out growing, kind of doing native plant starts for them that we can then plant throughout the community. So there are specifically native grasses, and I don't know very much about native grasses, but they might actually be the food that bison eat. So they
Oh.
might actually like those the best.
Love it. Love it. I just imagine bison like breaking in right to the greenhouse. How do they get to those microgreens on the top floor?
I know they definitely have to go upstairs, which could be challenging.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for a great conversation. It was really great to talk about the growing side of Vertical Harvest. You know, we see you a lot in media and all the great things you're doing for the communities that you're currently in and moving into. But to talk a little bit of tech talk with you, it's been really fun. Yeah, thank you for your insights today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Nadia. It's been so fun to talk, and yeah, I know I feel like we barely touched on our grow well model, our employment model, and serving, providing jobs for traditionally underemployed people. And that's such a it's such a driving force for myself and for everyone that works at Vertical Harvest. But yeah, I mean, I just love all aspects of the company. So it's been really fun to talk about growing and the more technical, nerdy stuff with you too.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon, I'm sure.
That sounds great. Thanks, Nadia.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Dr. Nadia Sabeh interviewing Emily Churchill, Director of Growing and Food Safety for Vertical Harvest, for our series, What Plants Crave. Tune in next week for our next episode. Dr. Sabeh will be speaking to Tad Hussey, co-founder of Kiss Organics and host of his own podcast called Cannabis Cultivation and Science. Find links to that and Kiss Organics on our website, drgreenhouse.com. I'm Dennis Wadan, and this has been The Doctor Is In with Dr. Nadia Sabeh. Thank you for listening.